At the BBQ, my daughter-in-law Amber laughed loudly across the table and said, "You'll be in a nursing home soon, right?" My son Kevin laughed along with her like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. I didn't say a word, but the next morning, I made a decision. 3 weeks later, everything changed. They had shown up 40 minutes late that day, walking in like they owned the place. Kevin gave me that half-hearted side hug he's been doing ever since Amber started whispering in his ear. Amber marched in like she was running the show, wrinkled her nose at the potato salad I spent 5 hours making, and didn't even try to hide it. I've been cooking the 4th of July meal since 1983, but somehow, I'd been turned into the help. She threw her purse onto my chair and said, "This wallpaper looks like a retirement home," then turned to Kevin and let out that high-pitched fake laugh she uses when she wants to humiliate me. And again he laughed, like I wasn't even there. The kids didn't bother to say hello. Harper went straight to the carpet. Wyatt started tearing napkins, and Maddie gave me that eye roll only preteens can master, like I was ruining her day just by breathing. Still, I smiled through my teeth and served burgers, pretending not to hear Amber whisper to Charlotte, "Do you think she even knows what TikTok is?" We had dinner outside like always, around the long table under the big oak tree by my late husband the year Kevin was born. We passed corn, ribs, and pitchers of watered-down lemonade. Then Amber raised her wine glass, locked eyes with me, and said loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, "We'll have to start touring nursing homes soon, right? Or are you planning to haunt this place forever?" The table went quiet for a second, and Kevin snorted like a little boy who just heard something naughty in class. Even Charlotte gave a weird laugh, probably hoping she wasn't next. I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. I just kept chewing my chicken and looked at my son, really looked at him. Man wondered what kind of man lets his wife talk to his mother like that, especially in her own backyard. Nobody brought it up again, but I caught Camille's glance from across the yard while she refilled the chips. She knew. She saw I was falling apart inside. Meanwhile, the kids kept laughing at their screens, and I was wiping barbecue sauce off Wyatt's cheek when I realized he hadn't even said thank you. The rest of the night was a blur, folding chairs, paper plates, and empty thank yous that felt like lines from a bad play. They left without helping clean up, as usual. I looked at the oak tree one last time, then went inside, locked the door, and walked to the closet where I kept the fireproof box. I pulled out a folder labeled Plan B. Inside was the deed, a transfer of title, the trust documents, and my lawyer Dean's business card. I hadn't touched that folder in over a year, but I hadn't thrown it out either. And that night, with Amber's voice still ringing in my ears and the smell of BBQ smoke in my clothes, I picked up my phone and typed one message: "I'm ready." The truth is, I didn't fall apart at that BBQ. I'd been falling apart slowly, for years, ever since they started treating me like I didn't matter in the house. I worked my whole life to keep. I skipped meals so Kevin could have braces. I taught 3rd grade in classrooms with no air conditioning. And this was how it ended. With smirks and side eyes and jokes about nursing homes. That night was just the last page in a chapter. I began the day. Amber mocked my late husband's memorial photo, called it a Sears portrait. Kevin brushed it off like she didn't mean it, but I knew she did. And every time I let something slide, she pushed it further. First, it was funny comments about my clutter. Then came the home organization gift cards for Christmas. Then the not-so-subtle hints about retirement homes with pickleball courts so they could have space. And when Kevin said nothing, I stopped hoping he'd change. Instead, I started making my own backup plan. I met Dean through Camille's bridge group. I told him I wasn't trying to be dramatic, I just didn't want to be trapped or disrespected by people who thought I stopped being valuable after I hit menopause. Dean understood. He helped me set up a trust under my maiden name, hidden behind a Nevada LLC. So if Kevin and Amber ever tried to dig around, all they'd find was a locked door. I pay the property taxes from an account Kevin doesn't know about. Last year, when they offered to cover the utilities, I politely said no and watched Amber post a smug little Instagram story about doing our part for the older generation. They think they know everything, but they have no idea what's coming. I was still paying for her son's Minecraft subscription, if you can believe that. I'd made spreadsheets of everything, backed up all my photos, saved copies of every important paper and password, not because I wanted to get even, but because deep down, I knew that one day they'd cross a line I couldn't ignore. And when Amber tapped her wine glass and said, "Nursing home." I wasn't even shocked. Honestly, I felt relieved. At last, I had a reason I could stand by a line so clear I wouldn't spend the rest of my life second-guessing myself. After I sent Dean the text, I sat down at the kitchen table, the same spot where Kevin used to do his spelling homework, and looked out at the yard where I taught him to ride a bike. I didn't cry. My hands didn't shake. I just started going through my checklist. I transferred the utilities out of my name, cancelled the alarm system, called Camille to borrow her van, and let the trust's agent know I was ready to set the closing date. I had already packed up everything that mattered to me: the photos, the papers, the quilt my mom made when I finished college, and the little ceramic cat Kevin made in first grade. The rest, they could keep it, sell it, or burn it. I didn't care anymore. The truth is, I hadn't really lived in that house for years, not since Amber started calling me Babs, like we were on some silly reality show, and Kevin began asking me to text before I came into my own kitchen. I didn't need revenge. I needed air. This plan wasn't about teaching them a lesson. It was about saving myself from dying with my mouth shut, sitting there while Amber redecorated around me like I was just another old pillow she couldn't get rid of. I made 3 calls that night, one to Dean, one to Camille, and one to the moving company I'd researched months ago. I remember the day I started the list. Amber had said I should declutter for the sake of family flow. Every time she said something like that, I added another name to my spreadsheet, another backup plan. So Nola's night wasn't some breakdown. It was my green light. The next morning, Camille showed up with coffee and a pair of gardening gloves. She didn't ask why. She just looked me in the eye and said, "Where do you want to start?" I pointed to the hallway closet and told her, "Start with everything they never noticed missing." I didn't sleep at all that night, not because I was scared, but because my whole body was buzzing with a feeling I hadn't had in years. It was like something heavy finally slipped off me in the dark, like the weight I'd carried since Kevin brought Amber into our lives was gone. And now there was space inside me, something sharp and clean. Camille had brought empty boxes, and we packed all day with the quiet focus of women who have spent too long carrying everyone else's burdens. She didn't make any big speeches. She just handed me the packing tape and helped me fold up my wedding dress. I put it in a bin, labeled sentimental but optional. We were halfway through the linen closet when I heard Amber's voice on speakerphone through the open window. I stopped, holding a stack of towels, because the words were so ugly and came so easily to her. She said, honestly, if she caught the flu and dropped, we could finally put in those skylights. Then she laughed a loud, sharp laugh. Kevin mumbled something I couldn't quite hear, but he didn't stop her. He didn't tell her it was wrong. He just let it happen like it was normal to talk about your mother dying as some home improvement project. Standing there, I thought, this is it. This is the moment I won't forgive. Not because it was the meanest thing they'd ever said, but because it was the most honest. They'd finally stopped pretending to Quran. That meant I could finally stop pretending to wait for them to change. I walked back into the kitchen, opened the safe, and pulled out the trust documents and escrow papers Dean had sent over. Everything was signed. The buyer had cash. The sale would close in 10 days, and there wasn't a thing in Kevin or Amber's name to stop it. I put the papers in a big manila envelope, wrote final transfer on the front, and tucked it into my purse like I was heading to a checkup instead of ending a whole chapter of my life. Later that night, Kevin texted me a blurry picture of Harper asleep on the couch. He wrote, "She missed you today." I stared at it for a long minute. I knew that if I replied Evan something small like, "Tell her I love her," it would be like telling them they still had a way back into my heart, that I could still be guilted into staying. So I didn't reply. I didn't type a single word. I set the phone down and walked out into the backyard, where the old oak tree stood under the stars. I hadn't told them about the sale yet. I hadn't said anything, and I wouldn't, because, after 7 years of their jokes and little digs dressed up as family dynamics, they didn't deserve a warning. I stood there for a moment, looking at the swing Kevin built when Maddie was 4, and the brick path I laid by hand the summer after Tom died, that spot in the yard, the one by the fences where I buried my dog, Jasper. Before I left, I took a picture of it and saved it on my phone in a folder I called Before I Let Go. Then I turned around, went inside, and started packing. I wrapped up my baking dishes and my mom's old teacups, labeled everything I cared about, and left the rest with no tags at all. Camille stayed with me until midnight. Before she left, she kissed my cheek and said, They'll never see it coming. I nodded, but in my head, I was already somewhere else, already picturing it. Kevin fumbling with the house key that wouldn't work anymore. Amber screeching into her phone about legal rights she didn't have. Maddie asking where Grandma went and not getting an answer that made any sense. The truth is, the real warning wasn't some big speech or letter. It was every time I stayed quiet when Amber made her little digs. Every holiday I cooked without a thank you. Every dinner I sat through while they laughed at me. My silence was the warning, they just never heard it. By the time the sun came up, everything I needed was packed into Camille's old Vantha, same one she usually used to haul mulch and folding chairs. Now it was lined with moving blankets and boxers filled with the only things that mattered. Family photos stuffed in old shoeboxes, my marriage certificate, the ceramic cat Kevin made in 2nd grade, a locked case with all my documents, and a Tupperware of Camille's lemon bars because she knew I probably wouldn't eat if there wasn't something sweet handy. I stood in the doorway for exactly 1 minute, not to be sad, but to remember it. Every crack in the tile, the hum of the fridge, the faint smell of lavender from the spray I used to cover up the stale scent of all their takeout boxes that Amber never bothered to throw away. Then I walked through each room with my checklist. I unplugged the router, turned off the pilot light, and left nothing behind except for one letter. I taped it right above the grocery list Amber had started last week. It said, "This home has been sold. I no longer live here. You have 48 hours to leave. Legal documents enclosed. Please contact Dean Lell for any questions. Do not call me." I wrote it in black ink on thick cream paper. Underneath I left a notarized copy of the deed transfer, stamped with the trust's logo and the buyer's lawyer's signature, clear as day. I didn't seal the envelope on purpose. I wanted Amber to see how real it was, to feel with her own hands how little control she'd ever had. When I stepped outside, Camille was waiting by the van. She held out 2 travel mugs and a trash bag full of my old kitchen rags. We didn't talk until we were on the freeway. Even then, it wasn't some big dramatic moment. She just looked over and asked, "You sure you're okay?" And I said, "Not yet, but I will be." We reached my new place in less than an hour. Little condo downtown. No lawn, no porch, no memories, just clean walls, working plumbing, and a lock that no one else had a key to. I didn't tell Kevin or Amber where I was moving. I didn't leave a forwarding address. I didn't drop any hints. I disappeared so completely that if I hadn't left the letter, they probably would have called the police thinking something happened to me. That first night, I sat on the floor with a blanket around my shoulders and a lamp plugged in beside me. I ate lemon bars and listened to nothing at all. No TV, no appliances, no voices, just the quiet of finally being alone, in a place where nobody expected me to play hostess or swallow my pride. The next morning, I met Sandra Chu, the buyer. She shook my hand without any small talk and said, "All clean on title. We're closing Tuesday." She didn't ask why I was selling. She didn't look at me with pity. She just walked around the yard and confirmed the paperwork like we were finishing up a regular business deal. And in a way, that's exactly what it was. My life had turned into a transaction, and this was me collecting what I was owed for all those years of work and quiet hurt. Back at the house, they were still gone for the weekend, off at some birthday party up north that Amber insisted on going to, even though Maddie had the flu. I knew because Amber had posted one of those boomerang videos on Instagram. Harper, licking frosting off a cake, with a caption that said, "Nothing stops a party queen." So they had no idea. They didn't feel the floor shifting under their feet. But I could see it so clearly in my mind. Kevin trying to stick his key in the lock and feeling it jam. Amber stomping around to the back door, thinking she'd just march right in and be in charge, only to find the lock changed there, too. I pictured them reading my note, arguing over what it meant, Googling trust law, and finally calling a locksmith who would tell them exactly what I already knew: if your name isn't on the title, your key doesn't mean a thing. The feeling that washed over me wasn't happiness or revenge. It was something lighter, like finally dropping a suitcase I'd been dragging behind me for years. Like I'd been running a marathon I never signed up for, and now I was allowed to stop. That second night, I lay in my new bed with fresh sheets and no noise except the city traffic far below. And for the first time in a long time, I fell asleep without wondering who I had to be in the morning. I didn't dream about them that night. I didn't see the house or the past in my sleep. I dreamed about lemon bars and the feeling of turning a key in a lock that no one else would ever use again. They got back Sunday afternoon, exactly 48 hours after I'd moved out. It couldn't have played out better if I'd planned it all like a movie. Amber was the first to come up the driveway, holding a giant iced coffee in one hand and a bunch of shopping bags in the other, her phone pressed to her ear as she barked orders about some party she was planning. She didn't have a clue what was waiting. Kevin followed behind her, carrying Harper half asleep on his shoulder while he tried to pop the trunk open with his elbow. I only know all this because Camille's neighbor, Alone, the one who walks his dog like he's guarding a military base, was outside trimming his roses when they pulled up. Later, he told us everything, down to the second Amber's key didn't work. She tried the front door once, then again, and when it didn't budge, she screamed Kevin's name like he was the one who broke it. Kevin tried it too, mumbled something about the latch being stuck, until Maddie pulled out her phone and saw the envelope taped to the glass. Kevin read the letter out loud. Amber just paced in circles, saying, "Is this a joke?" over and over, like saying it might somehow change reality. When she got to the part about contacting Dean, she actually stomped her foot and yelled, "That smug old bat got a lawyer." Kevin turned pale and sat down on the front steps like he'd had the air knocked out of him, and I guess that's when he finally realized I hadn't just changed the locks, I'd changed the whole game. They tried the back door, they tried the garage code, then they called a locksmith. But Sandra, the buyer, was ready. She handed the locksmith all the paperwork before he could even ask. He took one look and said, "This property belongs to a trust now. You're not on the title." That's when it really blew up. Amber called 911 and told the dispatcher they were being locked out of their primary residence. And believe it or not, the police actually showed up to officers in full uniform, knocking on the door. But Sandra was calm as ever. She already had her ID and the purchase agreement in hand. One of the officers, a tall man named Ray Moreno, looked at Kevin and said, "Sir, I understand this is upsetting, but unless you can show proof of ownership or tenancy, you need to leave." Kevin argued, of course. He said he'd lived there for 6 years, paid for the kids' bunk beds, kept the yard nice. But Officer Moreno just shook his head and said, "That doesn't change the deed, sir." Amber started filming and yelling about elder abuse and fraud. Sandra didn't flinch. She asked them to please step off the porch. The officer gave them 10 minutes to collect anything left on the lawn and then told them they had to go. They ended up driving to a little motel about half an hour away. Alan said it was one of those cheap places next to a gas station and a boarded-up Denny's. That's where they spent the next 2 nights. Alan also told me that Kevin came back early the next morning to try the door again, but the locks were still changed, and no one answered. I didn't hear any of this right away. "Camille, read me a text Amber sent her. It said, 'Hope you're proud of what your friend did to her own grandchildren.'" And I'll be honest, when I heard that, it stung for a moment. Not because I believed her, but because I knew Maddie and Wyatt would be confused. Part of me thought about writing them a letter, explaining that it wasn't about them, that maybe one day they'd understand. But then I remembered last Christmas. Maddie had asked Amber loud enough for me to hear, "Why does Grammy always look like she's trying too hard?" And Amber laughed and said, "Because she is." That was the moment I stopped thinking of myself as their grandmother in any way that mattered except blood. So no, I didn't reply. I didn't send an apology. I didn't reach out at all. Instead, that night, I opened the bottle of red wine Camille brought over. We poured 2 glasses and raised them in a quiet toast apiece. The next morning, I mailed Sandra a thank you card. I included a bottle of lemon oil and wrote a short note. "May the house you bought always be quieter than the one you found." And just to twist the knife a tiny bit, not out of spite, but for closure, I sent a certified package to their motel. No return address, just a plain manila envelope with a full-page printout of Amber's BBQ comment. "You'll be in a nursing home soon, right?" No explanation, no signature, just her own words staring back at her like a mirror. They had checked into room 208 the same day they were kicked off the porch. I only knew that because Kevin's LinkedIn still had his location set to public. And Amber, who said she was too traumatized to speak, posted a filtered photo of Harper, curled up on a scratchy motel blanket with the caption, "Chaos, but cute." I took a screenshot. Not out of revenge, just habit. Documenting it all helped keep me grounded, helped remind me that I wasn't being cruel. I was just done being the cleanup crew for their messes. Camille called that night and asked if I wanted to go see a movie to celebrate. I told her no, not because I was sad, but because I was tired. The kind of tired that lives deep in your bones after carrying someone else's weight for so long. You forget what light even feels like. So instead, I sat on the balcony. I watched the streetlights flicker on. I poured a glass of iced tea and deleted Kevin's number from my phone. Not because I thought he'd stop calling, but because I didn't trust myself not to pick up when guilt eventually came knocking. And sure enough, the next morning, he called, twice. Left a voicemail that said, "Mom, we're not okay. The kids don't understand. Please, just talk to me." I listened to it once, then again, slower, and I noticed something. He said the kids don't understand, but not once did he say he did. No apology, no asking why, no mention of Amber's insults or the 7 years of slow erosion that brought us here. Just the assumption that I'd feel bad enough to undo everything. I didn't respond. Instead, I spent the afternoon filling out change of address forms, transferring bills to the new place, and setting up a P.O. box so nothing would come to me unless I wanted it to. That week, for the first time in a year, I started sleeping through the night. Not because my bed was softer, but because no one was in the next room complaining about the thermostat, asking where the mustard was, or leaving dishes like I was some unpaid maid in a home I used to own. I bought a little rosemary bush I named May. I watered it every morning while listening to a podcast about setting boundaries and recovering from long-term stress. Meanwhile, Amber launched a full PR campaign online, posting vague quotes about betrayal, tagging no one but making it obvious who she blamed. Camille texted me screenshots of the comments people left her. "You're so strong, Mama. Some people don't deserve grandkids. You did what you had to do." I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my toast. This woman who called me overbearing behind my back was now playing the victim because she didn't bother to read a property deed. Midweek, Kevin tried again. This time he sent a long email titled, "From your son who still loves you." I didn't open it. I marked it as unread and dragged it into a folder I've since named Emotional Blackmail. Then I shut my laptop and went for a walk. At the thrift store down the street, I bought a second-hand lamp shaped like a lighthouse. The cashier smiled and said, "Looks like you're building a new life." And I said, "I am," and I meant it. Later that night, I was going through a box from storage when I found a birthday card from Maddie, the kind she used to make when she was little. Crooked hearts, backwards letters, a hand-drawn picture of us baking cookies. For a second, I just stared at it. That ache in my stomach came back. The what-ifs, the maybe it was too harsh thoughts. I almost pulled out my phone. But then I remembered last Easter Maddie rolling her eyes when I asked her to put her plate in the sink, saying, "Mom says you like doing this stuff anyway," and Amber, standing behind her, didn't say a word. That birthday card wasn't from the Maddie I know today. It was from the little girl who used to love me before Amber slowly chipped away at that bond until there was barely anything left. So I put the card in a drawer, not to throw away, but not to look at again anytime soon. Then I closed the drawer without a second thought. That night, I texted Natalie, my goddaughter, and said, "Let's schedule the will changes." "I'm ready," when she called and gently asked, "Do you want to talk about it first?" I said, "No, I already did. For 7 years, no one listened." The thing about people like Amber is they don't stay quiet when they lose. They can't. So it didn't surprise me at all when she turned getting kicked out into an entire performance. It started with a bunch of filtered Instagram stories she titled, "When Family Betrays You." She panned her phone around their cramped motel room in that fake whispery voice like she was filming some sad documentary. Kevin sat in the background looking miserable. Harper was on the floor playing with a sock. Maddie scrolled her phone, not even glancing up. I watched all of it. From a burner account Camille helped me set up. I only used it to keep an eye on their online tantrums. At first, I figured Amber was just fishing for attention. But then someone posted the videos on Reddit, and within a day it blew up. The post was called, "Mother-in-Law Evicts Freeloading Family in Legal Revenge Move." Thousands of people commented, most of them cheering on the mystery woman behind it all. People on the internet pieced everything together. They used clues in the background, real estate records, and screenshots from Amber's own posts. All of a sudden, Amber didn't look like a struggling mom protecting her kids. She looked like exactly what she was, the woman who let me pay her bills while she made fun of me behind my back. Within a week, Kevin's job found out. Someone emailed the Reddit thread to his HR department because his LinkedIn was still public. He didn't get fired, but he was asked to take a leave of absence. Amber posted about that right away, calling it corporate bullying by association and tagging random influencers as if one of them might sponsor her motel stay. Then she went on TikTok, crying about how trauma hits different when it's family. I didn't feel happy watching it. I didn't feel angry either, just this cold, distant clarity like I was looking through a glass wall at people I used to know, watching them mouth lines in a play they didn't even write, but somehow thought they deserved to direct. And then the messages started. Not to me I was gone but to Camille. She'd left one comment under Amber's post that said, "Some people need to learn gratitude." That was all it took. Suddenly, Camille was getting flooded with nasty messages, people calling her toxic, a snake, a bitter old hag. But Camille is Camille. She picked one of the trolls and wrote back, "You defend someone who tried to steal a house from a widow," and attached a PDF of the trust deed. After that, the hate stopped. I didn't get involved. I didn't comment or defend myself. I just watched it all play out from my balcony while I watered May, my little rosemary plant, and folded my laundry, like none of it could touch me anymore. Then, one day, I got an email from a Gmail address I didn't recognize. There was only one sentence. "Why doesn't Grandma want us anymore?" It hit me like someone swung a shovel into my chest. I knew it was Maddie. I recognized the way she always typed anymore as one long word, the same way she did on her spelling tests when she was little. For a minute, I just sat there staring at the screen. I wondered if maybe I should have left the letter instead of just the legal notice. If I should have left the door open a crack, at least for the kids. But then I thought back to that Easter. I remembered Maddie parroting Amber's mean jokes to Wyatt, calling me extra because Amber thought it was funny, to teach them sarcasm instead of respect. And I knew the truth. Even if I left that door open, they wouldn't walk through it alone. They'd bring her with them. I didn't reply. Instead, I picked up my little voice recorder, the same one I'd used all those years to record Amber's comments, and I spoke one line into it. "You'll understand when you're older. And I still love you." I saved it to a flash drive. I labeled it for later and locked it away. That night, I didn't sleep well. Not from guilt, but from grief. Not for who they were, but for who I'd once hoped they might become. In the morning, I emailed Dean. I asked if he could look over a clause I wanted to add to my will. A conditional inheritance. No money until they'd logged community service hours and had them verified by someone impartial. Dean replied in 10 minutes. Already anticipated. Drafting now. I shut my laptop, made myself some coffee, and looked out the window, not at all the chaos but at the peace I'd finally bought for myself. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when she showed up, and I knew it was her, the second. I heard the knock sharp and fast, like someone trying to take charge before I even opened the door. I didn't answer right away. I just looked through the peephole and saw Amber standing there. She had on huge sunglasses and her hair pulled back tight, holding Harper on her hip like she was just another thing she needed to carry. Kevin was behind her, looking blank, like he always did when he didn't want to face anything. I opened the door just a crack, enough so they could see I was still here, still fine, and not afraid. Amber spoke first. Her voice was soft, but it still sounded practiced, like she'd been rehearsing it in the car. "Barbara, we need to talk. This has gone too far. The kids are suffering. I didn't invite them in. I didn't even answer. I just stood there, letting them feel how small they really were without the house to hide behind." Amber tried again, her voice louder this time. "We're willing to work something out, okay? We can all sit down, fix this for the kids." And that's when Harper, still half asleep on her shoulder, looked up at me and asked, "Are we going back to Grammy's house now?" My chest tightened, but not from guilt, just from the heavy, raw truth that even she thought this could still be undone. Kevin finally stepped forward. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded letter, maybe from a lawyer, maybe just a threat. I didn't take it. Instead, I opened the little table by my door, pulled out the flash drive I'd labeled, just in case, and held it out to Amber. She took it like it was something hot, glancing down with her eyebrows pulled tight. "What is this?" she asked. I looked her right in the face and spoke calmly, my voice steady. "It's every voicemail, every group text, every message where you mocked me, left me out, or talked about me like I was already dead. It's all there." Her mouth opened like she wanted to deny it, but then something changed in her eyes. Maybe she remembered the worst of it. Maybe she knew she couldn't pretend anymore. Kevin looked away. He didn't even try to defend her. "You didn't just forget I was a person," I said, still calm. "You taught my grandchildren to forget, too." Amber tried to cut in. "That's not fair. We were just joking." I held up my hand to stop her. "Jokes don't cost people their homes. You did that all by yourself." Harper started to whimper. Kevin picked her up and said, "Please, Mom, don't shut the door like this. We're family." For the first time, I looked straight into his eyes. "You stopped being my family the day you laughed when she said I should be in a nursing home." His face fell just enough to show a crack, but not enough to fix it. Amber didn't say another word. She turned around, mumbling something under her breath I didn't bother to hear. Kevin lingered a second longer, holding Harper like a shield. Then he followed her. I closed the door, not with anger, not with drama, just with finality. And when the lock clicked into place, I didn't lean on it or cry. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and sat down. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from Kevin. "I hope you can live with what you've done." I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it without replying. I could live with what I'd done. In fact, it was the first thing in years I felt I could live with at all. The next day, I called Dean and told him I was ready to finalize everything. No more drafts. No more thinking it over. Just make it official and impossible to undo. I spelled it out. Kevin and Amber were to get nothing. Not a cent, not a plate, not even a note explaining why. The grandchildren would only inherit through a special trust. They'd have to earn it 1,000 hours of community service before they turned 21. The hours would be tracked by a case manager with no ties to the family, no shortcuts, no excuses. Dean didn't flinch. He just said, "Understood?" and emailed me the final paperwork to sign. As I clicked through each page, it felt like bricks sliding off my shoulders. This wasn't revenge anymore. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about setting a boundary so strong they couldn't twist it into something else. I added one last piece by hand, a note attached to the official letter. "Under no circumstances are Kevin or Amber to be notified upon my death. Let them find out with everyone else." I gave the letter to Natalie, my goddaughter, the same Natalie who brought me soup when I was sick, who called just to check on me when nobody else did. When I had the flu, Natalie was the one who brought soup without ever asking about money or inheritance. She never wanted anything from me except to make sure I was okay. I called her that night and said, "It's official." She asked, "You okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I finally am." She came by the next day with Thai food and a six-pack of sparkling water, and we ate out on the balcony like it was any other Tuesday. But it wasn't. Something in me had shifted. I could breathe in a way I hadn't in years. Nobody was going to knock on my door pretending they loved me just to get something. Nobody was going to trap me at a holiday dinner with guilt or fake affection. Nobody was going to smile at me while secretly wishing I'd disappear. Kevin tried texting against the short message this time. "So that's it." I didn't reply. I didn't even open it. I blocked the number and deleted the thread without a second thought. Later that evening, Camille came by with a lemon tart and a cheap bottle of champagne. She said, "This calls for something bubbly," and I laughed harder than I had in months. We sat together until the sun went down. At one point, she raised her glass and said, "Two boundaries," and finally, not giving a damn. I clinked my glass and said, "Too quiet," because that's what it was. Not quiet, not silence because I was afraid, but quiet because I chose it. After she left, I gathered a few things for a small memory box: the flash drive, a copy of the will, a photo of me and Kevin when he was 10, and one of Tom holding Kevin up on his shoulders. I put them inside with a note on top, for history, not for forgiveness. I locked the box and slid it under my bed, next to the cedar chest I hadn't opened since Tom died. Before I went to sleep, I lit a candle and stood at the window for a minute, looking out at the city lights and the reminder that life keeps moving whether you're part of someone's story or not. I didn't miss them, not the real them. Whatever grief I still carried was for the version of my son I'd imagined, the one who disappeared the day he let her speak for both of them. It's been 8 months since I shut that door and handed Amber the flash drive. I haven't heard a word since. Not a text, not a voicemail, not even a holiday card with the kids' handprints like they used to send before everything soured. And the truth is, I don't miss them. not the way they are now. Not the versions of them that stood on my porch begging for forgiveness without ever saying sorry. I didn't block them because I was bitter. I blocked them because I'm free. And I have no interest in giving that freedom back to people who treated my kindness like it was currency to spend. Christmas came and went with no surprise visits, no guilt trips. I went to Camille's, brought my lemon bars and a photo album, and when someone asked if I had any kids, I just said, not anymore, and left it at that. Natalie checks on me every Sunday. Sometimes she brings Thai food, sometimes she just sits with me while we watch trashy reality shows we pretend not to like. I started taking a pottery class on Thursdays. I joined a walking group for women over 65 who refuse to slow down for anybody. One of them asked me if I wanted to date again, and I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my water bottle. I don't want a man. I want peace. And I have that now. May, the rosemary plant, has grown 3 inches, and I talk to her every morning like she's a roommate who never interrupts. Every so often, I wonder what the kids think, if they ever ask about me, if Maddie remembers our baking nights, if Wyatt remembers how we'd build castles out of cereal boxes. But then I remember, any road back to them goes straight through Amber, and I already burned that bridge, salted the ground, and walked away barefoot. They haven't tried to sue, probably because Dean made it clear we were ready if they did, and I haven't felt the need to explain myself to anyone, because the people who mattered never asked me to. Last week, Natalie brought over a copy of the final, signed will. I put it in my safe without any ceremony. Everything's settled now. Every piece locked down so tightly they couldn't pry it open with a crowbar. I don't feel proud exactly. I feel resolved, like someone who finally stopped asking for a seat at a table she built herself. A few weeks ago, I did get one more email. It came from an anonymous address, just one sentence. Are you really never coming back? I didn't open it at first. I didn't want to know which of them sent it. But when I finally did, I realized it didn't matter, because the answer was already clear in every choice I'd made since that barbecue. No, I'm not coming back. And if the question is whether I ever will, the answer is still no. I replied with one line, the only thing left to say. We haven't spoken since the eviction, and I have no plans to change that. Please don't contact me again unless it's through legal counsel. Then I blocked the address, closed my laptop, and went outside to sit with May in the early light. People talk about closure like it's some big ceremony, one last conversation, where everyone cries and hugs and makes amends. But sometimes closure is just a locked door, a clear will, and 8 months of silence you have no desire to break. When Camille asked me the other day if I ever hear from Kevin, I said, no, we never spoke again. And that was the most honest sentence I've said in years. No anger, no sadness, no sting, just fact. Then I folded my towel, poured a fresh cup of coffee, and went back to living the life I built on my own terms, with no one left to apologize to.